Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 14th MVP tag meeting. I think we have the agenda posted. Let's see how many folks we got online. Let's go ahead and take roll for the tag members, please.
Ben O'Mara,
Here.
Justin Bourgault,
Here.
Steve Hart, Jenna Scoucher,
Here.
Ray Shipman, Laura Bloyd, Shalish Desai,
Here.
Ted Clifton, Ken Nelson, Ian Casey,
Here.
Bill Masaki,
Here.
Steve Simpson,
Here.
Brad McCutcheon, I see him online. Brad, Sandy said he was not going to be able to make it today.
Sorry, I'm here.
Oh, thank you. I saw you. Kevin Duell,
Here.
Allie Boris,
Here.
Jonathan Jones,
Here.
David Price. He actually declined the meeting, said he wasn't going to be able to make it, and we do have a quorum.
All right, fantastic. Is there anyone else on the call at the moment that would like to introduce themselves?
Hey
Go ahead and
guys,
raise your hand.
this is Laura. Sorry, I just joined.
Hi, this is Mike Moore. I'm a proponent of a couple proposals that'll be heard today.
This is
Thanks for
Brian.
having
This is Brian Phillips. I'm with Vista Utilities in the gas engineering department.
Nick Ursha, Columbia Hydronics.
Elizabeth Torsky, Cascade Natural Gas.
All right.
Earthquake Valve Company.
Sorry, David, I think I cut you off, but yeah, I see you on there. Thank you. All right. Anyone else on the line? Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to review and improve the agenda here. So take a quick look. Looks like we have the minutes from last meeting, and then the bulk of the agenda is taken up with code change proposals for the mechanical code and fuel gas code.
And you'll note these
oh.
two highlighted ones didn't appear on an earlier. We got them as revised proposals just before the deadline closed for revised proposals.
Got it. And Chris, I did have a question regarding that. If we needed to have the MVP committee or the building code council provide direction if the tag was to review those and provide recommendations on them, or are we going to be limited to just discussion today for those two?
I would say that we have a discussion and form a recommendation on it, and then it's up to the council and the committee if they want to consider them.
Okay, sounds good. All right, any other?
I'll move for approval of the agenda.
Okay. All right, we have a motion for approval of the agenda. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it. This is Steve Simpson.
All right, second from Steve. All right, any discussion regarding the agenda today? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the agenda is shown here. Please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion passes. So let's go to the next item, which is to review the minutes from the October 16th MVP tag meeting here. All right, is there any comments or as we scroll through, if someone wants to make a motion to approve, we can.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as sent out and posted here on the screen.
Second that.
All right. Motion from Steve and seconded by Bill. All right. Any discussion regarding the minutes from the last tag meeting? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the last tag meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
All right. Any opposed? All right. Sounds good. Motion passes. All right, so we can get into the agenda here. Looks like we had 3 code change proposals that we had tabled from the previous meeting. The first being one that I had submitted regarding HVI and requirements and certification requirements for unitary systems. And we had tabled it just we got some good feedback from some folks on the call last time, and I wanted to try to bring some other people that could provide testimony for it here. So the proposed change would be to provide an exception for unitary heat pump appliances, which may include integral ERVs from the HVI testing requirements. And we had heard some feedback at the last tag meeting that the HVI certification process did not seem to be so burdensome as for manufacturers to pursue it if desired. So I'll leave it there, and I don't know if there's anyone. I know Nick, you're on to maybe speak to this, and then if there's any others, please raise your hands so we can have a little bit more discussion on this item.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm going to ask a question, Ben. So specifically, HVI deals with the sound at the design airflows. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think we have a couple of HVI standards here. I believe they're for sound, and I believe they also cover airflow as well. It's my understanding. So, and yeah, we have the 3 HVI certifications there that these would be tested under and certified under.
Understood. And then I think I saw an update yesterday or the day before that was actually going to remove kitchen range hoods from requiring HVI certification. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that is another one of the code change proposals that we'll be discussing today.
Okay.
So obviously we want to eventually consider things holistically, but we do want to try to look at things as just kind of isolated, siloed proposals to bring forward for more of a holistic review moving forward.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we'll hear if anybody else has any feedback for us.
Shailesh, go ahead.
I think the purpose of this sort of testing is to make sure that we have adequate air being replaced or taken out. And so the testing is important in that case. We should not exclude any other equipment because it does save energy is one thing, but we want to make sure that it does take away the air or replaces as it was designed,
All right. Thanks, Shailesh. And yeah, I think based on the feedback, I do think there might be a good cause to retain the requirement for these. But yeah, Nick, I don't know if you had heard back from any of the manufacturers regarding just how much it would impact them to pursue the testing, if it would make it so there would be some types of equipment that would be more difficult to use on projects if the requirement was left as is.
Yeah, I think if you left it as is, some of the conversations I've had this week, we dealt with a major refrigerant change this year and the past couple of years, and that has slowed down the backlog of certification and testing both for HRI and HVI. Good news is on our end, of the two main lines that we carry with monoblock heat pumps that have integral ERVs, is that they are now wrapped up with AHRI testing and going into HVI. Again, when you're dealing with it from a higher level, there it's not just these two manufacturers. So good news on that development. And you know, being a homeowner myself, sound is a big deal. And I also agree that we need to be careful, make sure we're doing balanced ventilation. But you know, again, the way I think about HVI is it really comes down to sound. That's how I understand it. So that's where we stand.
Okay. Right. So I guess we'll leave it there. I'm curious if any of the tag members have any thoughts on if we want to move forward to include this for additional discussion and review at the council and during the public comment period, or potentially provide a motion to recommend not including this change proposal.
Just a thought, the exception is for fans that are integral to heat pumps, not separate fans. And I don't know how that works. I know that heat pumps are tested under a different standard as a unit, right? The fan, the compressor, all the working parts. I don't know if heat pumps are typically tested for their fans alone by HVI. I'd be curious to know about that.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify more where this section is, this is within the supply and exhaust fan section of the ventilation requirements, so whole house ventilation requirements. So
Sure.
it would be for equipment that has fans used for ventilation purposes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess I'm piggybacking on Shaila's comment that this equipment can provide a means for ventilation. But I don't think the fans in unitary equipment are tested by HVI. That would be a standalone exhaust fan or ventilation fan. So unless there's an objection to using a unitary appliance for ventilation, I don't see why this exception. I endorse this exception, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not saying you can have a fan that's not HVI tested in general, it's just integral fans. But I don't know how this works if a unitary piece of equipment gets its own listing and then an HVI listing in addition on the fan. I don't know if the proponent has anything to add.
Well, it is curious, right? Sorry, this is Nick again, Columbia Hydronics. So specifically, the HVI is talking about the ERVs and monoblock units. And what is interesting about monoblocks with ERVs is that generally speaking, your ventilation fans don't turn off unless you turn them off. But when your heating and cooling is running, now you have your heating and cooling fans generating more noise. So I guess when I think about a monoblock, you wouldn't, I don't think you would test the whole unit to HVI. It would just be the ERV section. Is that correct, Ben? And then the second question, how does it, when the unit goes into heating or cooling, do we no longer need to comply with HVI at that point? Because I mean, almost certainly your heating and cooling unit is going to be a little noisier.
All right, and I guess I'll respond to that and get to Laura, who has her hand up. And yeah, the purpose of the exception was to specify the ventilation fans on the supply and exhaust side would be, or the only portion of the equipment that would be accepted from this requirement. And I guess the typical assumption would be that there would be fans that would be provided for this ventilation purpose that would typically be in parallel to any fans that were used for air distribution or other purposes beyond ventilation. Right. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, we've been, we as a jurisdiction have been asked about the monoblock units and the use of the integral ERVs, and whether or not the exhaust fans need to be HVI certified. And our stance is that they do need to meet. They need to be HVI certified. I mean, this exception did not exist. I mean, I understand that, this change proposal, we're looking at it now. And so kind of my stance is I don't know, I mean, up until now, we've been saying that we want the manufacturers to test their ERVs, their integral ERVs to the HVI, to that standard. I would be a proponent to doing that as opposed to just, writing an exception, a new exception into the code for it. So those are my thoughts.
Right. Thanks, Laura. Kevin, good.
Oh, I guess my other question about this is, are there heat pump ERVs? Because that's what we're talking about, right?
There are.
Okay. Are they part of the HVI listing? Because I'm looking at that and I'm not seeing companies I normally think of as heat pump manufacturers. I mean, there's certainly, Greenheck, Panasonic, Braun, all that, but does the standard even cover a heat pump ERV? I just don't know. But my point is, if it doesn't, well, then there should be an exception because you can't possibly meet the standard. You're not part of it. But if it does, then yeah, go to it.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to mention, this is Eric Vandermeer, the monoblock air-to-air heat pumps are definitely one application. We also see this in like vertical stacking water source heat pumps, water-to-air heat pumps. There's all sorts of products out there that could serve a residence that are now having, integral ERVs with their own dedicated supply and exhaust fans integrated into that package. So yeah, this is definitely a growing market of products, and I mean it is. Yeah, we just have to be clear and clearly enforce this, that all these products have to get the HVI testing for those supply and exhaust fans, not for the entire, unit. So it's really an enforcement thing that we have to be consistent on as a state. So thank you.
Thank you. Yep, that's a great point. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks. Yes, Mike Moore with Stater, and I worked with HVI on many issues, and I'm pretty familiar with their standards, their testing regimens, and those kind of things. And just a couple comments. One is that some of these fans are kind of appended almost to the appliance, and when that happens, they can be likely differentiated from the appliance or removed from the appliance and tested based on the HVI protocols. So if they're just kind of integrated in a way that they're stacked onto it and removable, then certainly they could be tested HVI procedures. I'm not aware of any heat pumps being tested with the HERV in them as a full unit by HVI, but that could maybe be done by the laboratory. I don't see any prohibitions in HVI 920 to doing that, but there would probably need to be some work to be done to do that. But what this does is by saying that providing this exception to the HVI requirements is it leaves a vacuum for manufacturers and doesn't have any test method that's being referenced for HERV performance, such as AHRI 1060. That's one option that could be used for heat exchangers to determine the effectiveness of the heat exchanger, for example. And then there, of course, airflow testing like ANSI AMCA 210, ASHRAE 51 for testing the airflow. So I think that just by pulling back HVI entirely and not replacing it with anything, it just kind of opens the door for a lot of abuse on performance, overstated performance claims. So I would speak against this proposal for that reason.
All right, thanks, Mike. Any other comments regarding this code change proposal? Eric, good.
I guess depending on the preference of the tag, if we're not going to move forward with it, then you could just withdraw this proposal then, and if you don't, that is another potential path, right? Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks for that. And I think that's where maybe based on if the tag doesn't feel like it's worthwhile to pursue at this moment, we can definitely remove it. And the language that's in the current mechanical code would remain. So I don't see any issue with that at the moment, given kind of there's a varying degree of uncertainty around like what this would do and if it would if there is still a pathway for these manufacturers to comply with the code as written. So I think we can move on potentially, and I'll take a look and potentially submit a request to remove this code change proposal, unless there's anyone that wants to take any additional action on this item. All right, Krista, can we move on to the next one?
And I apologize, I just got this revised version. It is posted on the website, but it was only posted this morning. So this is the first time.
All right, and this will, if someone had downloaded it, like me, for example, would it have the November 14th date on the bottom there? We're looking at it.
Probably.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's like the older version. Okay. So this is one we had tabled from last meeting. This is regarding, I believe, the seismic valve requirements for, I think, I don't know if it's just natural gas or fuel gas lines serving buildings or structures. So we discussed this a bit at the last meeting and I think the tag in general had some concerns regarding some of the broadness of the language and some other things. So I don't know if Mike or others can speak to the revised version and what if any steps were taken to kind of address some of those concerns or other items in that revised proposal.
This is David with,
Or David, sorry.
yeah.
I meant to say David.
Oh,
Thank you.
no, it's totally fine. Yeah, so in the revised version, I kind of got with, I think it was Mr. Masaki. But it's now defined to category maps for residential construction in Washington State. And it's from a seismic design from the Department of Natural Resources. And so the areas that are most high at risk would be category 2 and category D1, or category D2 and category D1. And I also included building classifications in the different groups to better isolate the areas that have the most congregation of people. And so I don't know if what I did was enough, or if it needs to be further changed, but I think it was changed pretty well, in my opinion, but kind of toot my own horn. But yeah, if anyone else has anything to say, I'd be open to it. Oh, and one other thing, I also spoke with Harold Tobin, a professor at WSU, or no, not WSU, UW. And he said that, when it does eventually, if it does possibly get moved on, he would love to be a proponent for this amendment as well.
All right, thanks, David. And I don't know if anyone's had the chance to review it, so maybe we kind of page through here as we discuss. Shailesh, go ahead.
Yeah, it says on 404.21.1 seismic valve, it says when system alterations are made. Now, alterations to what extent,
I believe the wording my intent was in the case of say a meter change, or an addition to a gas appliance, or the removal of a gas appliance. An alteration meaning, there being work done on the gas system that provides the service to the building or residence.
well, changing appliance like for like do you consider alterations?
Well, see, that's why I'm not really good at writing building code. This is my first time, so that's why I'm bringing it to you guys to maybe make it better, because I'm just a guy. So
Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see as we flip through this, but I'm just curious if there is there a map that shows the D2, D1 seismic categories included in this? And then the other question would be, does this apply to all different occupancies and, restaurants? Like, is it applicable to residential and that sort of thing? Is it just curious if it's included in, residential and all commercial projects?
yeah, so originally I wanted it to be more targeted towards like schools, healthcare facilities, memory care facilities, kinder cares, where kids are, things like that. But I included it in the groups EHIMR1 through R2, R3, R4. And I believe I don't know those classification codes really well, but it was I mainly picked those ones because it represented the most the places that had the most gathering of people within structures.
Right, and then, yeah, I think Krista had highlighted where that got added in the proposed language for 404.21. Steve, good.
Okay, yeah. So I did have prior conversation, but I'm looking at this and I don't see anything in here whereby the utility provider and what kind of background history you can use to validate other than a map, identifying that the infrastructure that is providing the gas service would or would not be able to withstand a certain level of movement before it became compromised, thereby nullifying a seismic valve. And without that that context or content, I would not be able to say emphatically like I agree or disagree with in any of these sections, because I would not be aware that what fragility the system is in its current state, meaning that based on its non-maintenance, its age, or the way that it's structured, that the gas utility provider could, in a small seismic event of 3 to 4, become compromised, and a seismic valve would be basically of no value. So I would really need to hear some of that first from the utility or from other sources or another source other than yourself or through you to provide that information, because really what you're asking somebody to do is very similar to go beyond or above the actual source. And if they're not going to create a mechanism for the stoppage of gas flow because their system is not capable of basically staying together in a seismic event, what good is a gas seismic shutoff? So that's my concern, but overall, it's a great mechanism to limit fires in a seismic event, and I agree with it. I just need more information.
Thanks, Steve. Ian, good.
Yeah, hi, Ian Casey. I'm on this tag serving, representing mechanical engineers, but I also happen to work for a gas utility, Northwest Natural. So when this first came out at the last tag meeting, I wanted to kind of reach out to some internal folks here at the utility to understand how they've been interacting with these devices in the field, because they're not new. They've been around for quite a while. And if you're walking around in a downtown setting, you've likely encountered some of the little red valves that are out there. So I reached out to our field services just to understand how they're interacting with these devices, and they said they've predominantly found them on commercial properties. And when they're responding to a call related to a seismic valve, since we haven't had a earthquake over that 5.2 magnitude limit where they activate, we're getting a call that, hey, my gas isn't working. So they call the gas company, and so we respond out there. The tenant, a lot of times in a commercial property situation, is unaware that these valves are on their line. And so Northwest Natural, their policy is when they show up and they see this valve is tripped, for whatever reason, it could be bumped, or a lot of the time the customer there doesn't know what tripped it. The policy is to advise them to contact a qualified person to reset that, because Northwest Natural's policy is not to do the resets. But then Northwest Natural would come back after the fact and turn the gas service back on at the meter, do a relight of appliances, and make sure everything is running right. So I don't know. I just want to kind of mention that was a concern from some of the people, the technician field service people I talked to at Northwest Natural. I didn't know if the proponent had any more information on some of these false alarm trips.
David, good.
Yeah, so to address the first gentleman that spoke about the existing infrastructure and the ability to withstand a seismic event of really any any size, whether it be 3, 5, 7, 8, whatever it is, I reached out to the engineering department at Puget Sound Energy, and they still haven't gotten back to me. I requested um, a list of things such as, when did you start installing natural gas lines to meet a certain requirement for, or if you have for seismic events, or um, anything, any standard guidelines that they have for new and older installation of service lines. And I still have yet to receive any information back. So that is also information I'm currently waiting on as well. As far as what Mr. Casey was talking about in regards to valves being tripped, um, we have encountered some stories like that before, and it's usually due to improper bracing and lack of like a car hitting a meter, which you would want the gas to shut off if a car did hit a meter. But with adequate bracing, the likeliness of the valve going off unintentionally is very, very, very rare. And as a gas piping company as well, every single valve that we've ever installed, we've never had a false alarm or an issue with any of ours because we properly brace them. So that is my 2 cents on that point.
All right, Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, I also had a question for David on the resetting procedure as well, because one manufacturer, I think it's called the Little Firefighter, it is recommending that a qualified person be there to reset that. I was just curious if David can provide some insight on who the recommended people are to do that reset procedure and what that procedure looks like.
Right. Well, as far as the resetting process, so it's recommended that a licensed piping technician come out and, in the case of a seismic event, perform a pressure test on the system that is after the meter being supplied into the building to make sure that there are no unintentional leaks. Without a seismic event being reported, there isn't any guidelines from the manufacturer regarding that. But there is a standard operating procedure that we would execute, and that would be assessing if there was any damage to the meter, to the building, and then also, checking to see if there's anything that could have possibly damaged the valve if someone struck it with a hammer or something like that. Other than that, the resetting process is pretty simple. It's making sure all of the pilot lights are off, or, all the cook burners are off, all the appliances are turned off, and then you reset the gas and then go ensure all existing pilot lights are lit inside the building. But that is a service that could be provided by any gas piping company.
All right, thanks, David. Looks like someone has their hand up. BPP 4917. I don't know who that is, but feel free to lower your hand and unmute.
Yes, this is Brian Phillips. I'm with Vista Utilities. I work in the gas engineering department, and I have just a few comments as well. And just I appreciate listening to the discussion. I like Ian. I went and talked to some of our field personnel regarding these valves, And just for note, I've specified these valves in other jurisdictions that had a higher seismic rating than Eastern Washington, where I currently work, and most of our systems are. And talking to the field personnel, there are issues with nuisance trips to the point bracing is potentially an issue. And we don't have the same policy that Northwest Natural does as far as resetting those valves. I think we may need to evaluate this if this is the condition. But some of our concerns are there are a lot of provisions in a natural gas distribution system for shutting off, isolating sections of the system. And there are some emergency valves that are installed in typically residential or light commercial applications. Different utilities may use different ones, but we have some of those that would cut it off at the main, not, and keep it from the service. Our concern is that this may add a lot of cost to the customer, both in the form of changing their piping configuration, because this would require it to be revised, bracing added, this valve installed. And then we're also concerned that on the operational side, we might see an increase in cost, which in turn does get passed on to customers in the form of rates. So we're not in the same seismic category as the western half of the state. And we understand, I looked at the original draft of this, but and this is the first I've seen of this one as far as, the groups go. And we understand that there's a higher risk on the western side of the state. But we haven't seen a lot of industry-wide data on how the introduction of these valves in a system, how it improves with the overall system. We recognize that it isolates the facility, but we kind of like to see evidence, on how these are operating maybe in a larger system where they're broadly applied. Anyway, and then another question I had is there are some very limited examples given for the cost that this will incur, and I noted that it looks like, I'm not real familiar with Mr. McGee's company, but it looks like they are an installer of these valves, and we saw an example for like a small commercial facility, and then maybe a larger one, and I'd like to see a more comprehensive cost analysis done, because I think this will have a lot of effects on people and the costs. Additionally, one of my questions is this is an installer who installs these valves. It does appear that there is a conflict of interest in this. And I'm concerned that this has a big cost associated with it if it gets put forth in the code. Anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Steve, good.
Yeah, I want to tag into that last comment about cost. I did obviously read this portion of the cost, but what's been addressed here is not identified in this cost analysis, and that is the fact that if I'm correctly hearing, and it was stated this way, that there would be additional needs for testing the system to the interior portion of the building, as well as if it were a pilot light type of old school gas appliance with a pilot light that had to be lit, then there's that added cost versus just a electronic arcs, other type of form of ignition. So I don't see that cost in here, and that would probably be a little bit harder to get a hold of, just because you'd have a variation of location by geography in that cost based on the type of wages that somebody may or may not get. So you might have a variable that would be significant. And has there been a focus on where most of the gas systems are at? Meaning that, again, going to cost and the fact that there are areas that may or may not have gas systems that may be easier to purchase and install, et cetera, rather than other areas by economics. So I'm not sure if there's been that diversity study included, but it would also need to be incorporated into a cost analysis. And I'm sure that would, I think in a new code, there's always unfunded mandates. And this would be one of them. Nobody's going to get compensated for being required to follow this new rule or code. So they want to know the particulars about it. And it all boils down to the cost and who's going to have to pay that cost and what are all the associated up and downstream effects of that cost. That's my comment.
Thanks. Maybe David, do you want to respond to that before I call on Kevin?
Yeah, as far as, so this is my first time writing a cost analysis or any type of building or international fuel gas code change. So as far as the analysis goes, this is roughly based off my experience and what our company has done in regards to retrofitting buildings. As far as the conflict of interest, we don't manufacture the valves. It was just an idea I had. It's a very small part of our business, and growing up in California, it was just, moving up here to Washington, I was like, well, that might be a good idea. So if anyone has the thought that I'm doing this to make money, it's not. It was just an idea I had that I thought could better protect, the population of Washington State. And so I understand that the cost analysis is a big part of introducing building codes that then make it, a requirement to do something to the building. This is my first time doing it. So if anyone else has any, guidance that could, or know how to write a cost analysis, the limit of my knowledge in doing it is simply that of letting you know what we have charged in the past and what it should cost. So.
Thanks, David. Kevin, good.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Kevin Noel, representing utilities. Just a note. We, like Ian indicated, we have had conversations with internal folks about how these are integrated into our systems. Usually, like Ian suggested, it's on a commercial or industrial customer, and most likely has a bypass so that they can manage this device a little bit. But more specifically, if there is a trip, as Ian indicated, what our service techs will come out to see what's going on. The customer doesn't know why their gas system isn't working. And then we will advise the customer because we can't reset the valves. They're not part of our system. If they're properly installed, they're downstream of the meter on the customer's pipe. And it's just our policy, and I think some other utilities policy, that we don't touch those. A qualified person has to reset that. So imagine it's 20 degrees outside, a building has no heat because their gas supply is off. We come out, we can't fix it. They have to call someone else who then has to come out. When they reset that valve, we have to turn the gas off for that process to occur. And then we have to come back out after they reset it to do a number of things. One is gradually pressurize their system. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. We have to inspect their system, make sure it's not leaking. We have to gradually feed gas back into those pipes so we don't overspin the meter, and then go through, and if they have any equipment that needs to be relit, do that process. So, picture potentially days for this process to complete itself. And the other piece of that is, well, no, that was my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. David, good.
Yeah, to address that issue of the scenario of it being 20 degrees and having some sort of failure of their heating system, there is also the chance that, you know, something fails in the home due to a seismic event and it fills the house full of gas and someone turns the electricity back on and it creates a fire, an explosion, or a medical facility or a daycare or a restaurant, whatever it is. It's this proposal wasn't to create a nuisance, and we can say, you know, what if all day, but at the same time, there's a lot of seismic professionals that say, hey, this will happen one day and we should be prepared. And this was just a small attempt to improve our infrastructure and the possibility of a natural gas fed fire in the event of a seismic event.
Thanks, David. Brian? Good.
Thank you. I spoke with one of our servicemen who had previously worked in the area of Southern California, and they had a number of these installed across their territory. And some of these were tripped from, you know, you could hit it with a trash can. They would get tripped. And what I understand is that organization had adopted an approach that I think in some ways echoes what was mentioned previously, that it becomes kind of a longer process to get turned back on. And it became such a nuisance that they were charging people when they would trip it, so that people would be really careful to not bump that. I think safety is paramount. I just think we need to really look at to use a gas term, the downstream consequences of this, and consider the operational costs, the installation costs, the potential impact to disadvantaged communities that are going to be forced to upgrade things. And also, I haven't had time to evaluate this, but it looks like we changed the occupancy classifications. And I'd like a little bit more time to look at that, maybe than we have here in the scope of this meeting. Thank you. That's my comment.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Go ahead.
Yeah, listening to the conversation, a lot of the concerns seem to be after the fact. And not discounting the initial construction costs, but looking at the California requirements, I believe these have been required since about 2000, 24 years, going on 25, for these valves being installed. And I also understand at the sale of a house, they're also required to be installed. So to me, that seems like that would give us a large database to pull from in terms of the nuisance calls that have occurred after the fact. What does that look like, so that we can alleviate some of those concerns? I don't know, David, if you have any of that information or know where to find it that may help us here make a decision.
And maybe I'll make a suggestion, just given that we haven't had a ton of time to look at the revised proposal, and maybe it would we are looking at having another tag meeting in the near future. So maybe it would be possible to have some additional discussion and maybe some more thorough cost analysis developed as well for the life cycle cost for the 7A item in the code change proposal form. That would maybe be my suggestion at this point. But David, go ahead.
Yeah, to address what Mr. McCoskey said, I have not had the opportunity to contact California or any representatives down there in regards to what he addressed there in regards to the nuisance portion of it, such as it unintentionally being triggered. But yeah, I plan on doing a better job at a cost analysis on that and some more research in California about that.
Great.
Mr. Chair, this is Steve Simpson. Would you entertain a motion to table this item for the upcoming next tag meeting for more discussion?
Yeah, so I was gonna call on Elizabeth, but you've put in a motion, so I'll wait for a second.
I'll second. This is Kevin.
Yeah, motion in a second. Right, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment as far as any installation on an existing building. I think it would be more appropriate to put that in the existing building code. Because I just know folks, if they're doing an alteration, they're going to go to that code and not the building code first. So that would just be my kind of a cleanup request.
All right, thank you. All right, so motion is to table this item, and I guess would that include would you want that to include not only this code change proposal but the other related one, GP 133 as well?
Since I'm the motion maker, I think it would be probably the same kind of conversation, Mr. Omura, and once again, I would agree to that.
As a second, I agree to that too.
Right. So motion would be to table this code change proposal as well as GP 1-033 until the next tag meeting, which we should be scheduling shortly. Any discussion regarding the motion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes. So thank you for the discussion on this, and we'll look forward to hopefully resolving tag discussion on it at the next meeting. All right, let's continue. So Chris, I don't think that we've looked at this one yet. Is that right?
No, we haven't on this one yet.
Okay.
And it looks like it's editorial more than anything else.
Correct. This is, yeah, this is Eric Vandermeer. This is an editorial correction to move up this exception that's kind of floating at the end of the section to be under item 2 of section 401.4. As this item is this exception is just applicable to item 2 only, so it's really just a renumbering editorial correction in the code for clarity.
All right, great. Any discussion? And Laura, good.
Yeah, I remember us talking about this at, I think during the tag, and so I'll make a motion to accept this code change proposal as written.
Thanks, Laura. Is there a second?
This Bill, I'll second that.
Thanks, Bill. All right, any discussion for this proposed change? Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just noticing that the exception as written applies to 401.4 in its entirety, and the proposal is to make it apply to only 0.2. Is that a significant change? I mean, it cleans up the language, I get that, but is it removing an exception from 1, 3, and 4 that would be useful?
No, it's really only applicable to the horizontally from the street and or the 25 feet above. Yeah, so that I mean, the enclosed parking garage intake can't be 25 feet from the, or 10 feet horizontally from the street typically, so.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Eric. Any additional discussion for this one? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor of recommending incorporating the code change proposal here, please say aye.
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 In any opposed? All right. Motion carries. Thank you. So this next one, so this is Chris, this is one of the ones that came in recently, is that right?
Yes, this was originally submitted as both an IMC and IRC proposal, and we can't accept the IRC ones yet, so we asked for a resubmittal, and it came back on day 29 of the 30 allowed by statute or
Okay.
WAC.
Right. And then, yeah, per what we had discussed earlier, we can take some time to review these and get some comment on them, but we can provide a recommendation on next steps. But I don't know if we can fully say that we're recommending adopting the section until we're directed to by the council. So we can flip through here, and then I think Mike, the proponent, I think you were on the call as well. If you want to kind of speak to this in the next code change proposal.
Yes, thanks, Ben. Mike Moore, Stater LLC, representing Brown Newtone, and yeah, just squeaked in right underneath the deadline here on this one, but yeah, thanks to staff for processing it and you guys for hearing it. The first thing I wanted to do was just do some clarifications around what testing is lab testing and what testing is field testing. I think that right now there could be some improvements in the language by just clarifying that. So if a technician, for example, is seeing that tested and rated in accordance with HVI's 915, 916, 920 are required, they can know that, oh, that's something that's a laboratory test and that I need to look for certification that the unit has been tested in accordance with that. It's not something that I need to do in the field for confirming the airflow rates, and that's in a separate section. So a lot of this is just up front anyway, clarifying what's laboratory test and what's a field test. And if you could scroll down, please, Krista. Or is Krista driving or somebody else? I don't know. Okay.
Yes, I'm driving today.
All right, thank you. We're there anyway. Just clarifying that airflow, using consistent terminology throughout. So airflow instead of flow. Again, field testing, where field testing applies. You'd scroll down again, please. Okay, thank you. So again, more clarifications around laboratory testing underneath number 1 there. In number 2, I just kind of collapsed number 3 and number 2. Number 3 is designed in accordance with manufacturer's installation instructions. So I just started number 2 off by saying the system shall be designed and installed in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. And then the airflow, all this information about how to test the airflow, I just parked it in section 403.4721 because that seemed to flow better just with cross-referencing from other sections. So this is essentially the same as is currently written. It just is trying to clarify the requirements here. Let's see, I use exhaust fans instead of exhaust systems, where fans are appropriate to reference in number 3 and number 4. And then number 1, the exception number 1, I did retain that. I just put it elsewhere for because it just flowed better. I thought in my opinion anyway, to put everything underneath duct length. So really, when you're confirming duct length, I'm proposing there are 3 options. Currently, there are 2 options in Washington's code. The first is that you do this field test and you verify the airflow on site. And then the second is that the ducts are prescriptively sized and that they're not more than, they're using this prescriptive exhaust duct sizing table. A limitation of this exhaust duct sizing table is that it only goes to 125, I believe, CFM. And there are certainly range hoods that far exceed 125 CFM. But if instead of this table, we use the ASHRAE 62.2 table, which is right below. Thanks, Krista, doing a great job there. This shows the duct diameters that are permitted for rigid and flex duct for various fan airflow ratings at a 1/4 inch water column of pressure. So this is, again, copied right from 62.2. It's more flexible than Washington's current code. It allows to size to higher airflows than are currently permitted by the table, and again is aligned with 62.2. If you'll scroll up just a little bit, Krista, so that would be option 2, is prescriptive sizing in accordance with 62.2 in place of the current prescriptive exhaust sizing table. And the third is, and again, you don't have to go to 62.2 to do the prescriptive sizing. It's right here in the code. You see, idea. The third is using nominal installed airflow, which is a recently released metric from HVI in HVI 920. And it basically just looks at the static pressure that a kitchen range hood is likely to encounter when you have 10 feet of duct and 2 elbows. And then it looks at the airflow that you're going to see based on the fan curve for that range hood, the certified testing points. You calculate the airflow of the range hood based on that system curve fit. So again, it's a rated value, and it applies to 10 feet or less of duct and 2 feet or 2 elbows or fewer. So just wanted to recognize that as being a way to prescriptively size ducts as well. And I should point out that there is a slight error in number 1 that I noticed in reviewing this. We should cross out where the duct system complies with the manufacturer's design criteria and underneath number 1 in the first line there. That's already required up above. And it's not an either or, it's basically saying that where your airflow is field verified here. That's one way to comply. Okay, if you scroll down a little bit more, please. All right, the next thing is just clarifying the kitchen range hood requirements and diagnostic testing for range hoods. And one thing that I saw in here is that we can just map, instead of referencing again the how to test the airflow, we just go back and reference section 403.47, how to field verify the airflow. And then when you're doing this airflow test, you have to do these things. So this is just tying everything together. And I remove this exception down below because now the charging language just applies to field verification and doesn't apply to prescriptive duct sizing as is currently written. So it's basically doing the same thing, again, just reorganizing language. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, there's the field verification requirements. And I also brought in a reference to capture efficiency value, which is currently recognized in the code, but it's not required to be field verified here. It's not referenced at all. It's just saying you need to field verify the rated airflow value. But really, if you're using a capture efficiency value, you should be using, for compliance, you should be field verifying that as well. So a lot there. And maybe this could be workshopped or something. If you guys are just seeing this for the first time, I'd be happy to work with any interested parties if you need some more time to digest it, but happy to answer any questions now.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Mike, for walking through this. Obviously, yeah, a lot of proposed change, but I mean, I think the intent is nice to see, and yeah. So I'll open it up if anyone has any initial thoughts here or other questions that they might have. Eric, good.
Question for Mike on the section we're looking at now, the field verification when you're doing the capture efficiency value. How do you know how that test is done in the field? And is it feasible to do that in the field or how? Yeah, can you provide any comments on that?
Great question, Eric. And the intent here is not to require that capture efficiency be tested in the field, but under 2.3, it's the rated airflow value or capture efficiency value listed in the HVI AHAM or equivalent directory. So that's what's being done here is you're just looking up the rating in the directories. That's the field verification component of the capture efficiency metric.
But so we're just asking them to verify that whatever rating is shown in the drawings or whatever the design documents that matches the product that's installed in the field. So yeah, maybe we want to, I don't know if that's clear to everybody in item 2.3 there, or if that needs more verbose language to describe that.
I guess it could say the rated airflow value or rated capture efficiency value as applicable listed in the directory. That might help clarify things. And that's what I was really trying to do here.
Field verified against the design value, you know, something like that at the end of the sentence. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, we're just checking value. The inspector is just checking labeling requirements, right?
Right.
The label on the device matches the, yeah, I don't know. Got it.
And,
okay.
And with that, also be applicable to item 2.5, I think.
Yes, I was expecting that rated there would modify both airflow and capture efficiency, but if we put it in front of both to make it clearer, then that's certainly accurate.
Shailesh, good.
So HVI 920, which is a product performance standard, they have third party and it says it's a voluntary. In that scope section, they mention is a voluntary section. And whether the inspector will have that kind of data available.
So right now, the code does require that that the rated value be confirmed when they're in the field, so that the kitchen range hood is inspected, and you look at the model number, cross-reference it with the directory to determine that the airflow meets the prescribed requirements. However, the code gives two options for compliance. One is using an airflow, and one is using a capture efficiency. And so if you're using a capture efficiency metric for compliance right now, there's no requirement that you reference that, that you also look up and confirm that number. You just have to confirm the airflow if you're using the airflow for compliance. If you're using capture efficiency for compliance, there's no requirement to verify the value in the directory. So this would just kind of tie things together. Regardless of which metric you're using, just confirm it in the directory.
And I guess one of the changes was to update the reference HVI standard to the 2024 version, it
Yes.
looks like. And obviously we have other, I think we have other sections that refer to that same standard. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious if there might be any other impacts by updating that reference.
Everything that's certified by HVI right now is certified in accordance with the latest version of 920. So that's the one that's in effect. So it's just keeping pace with 920. The latest version does include the metric for calculating nominal installed airflow, which again is the intersection of the system curve, typical system curve, and a fan curve to estimate the in situ performance of a range hood as far as airflow goes. And so that's the primary difference that you get here is just the availability of accessing that rating as an option here as proposed in the code.
Yeah, thanks for going through that. Great. Any other questions or comments regarding this proposed change? And I don't know if we would want to make a motion to provide just kind of a general direction that the tag would propose, or we could, of course, have this tabled for additional discussion at the next tag meeting and give folks a little bit more time to evaluate the proposed change. Laura, good.
Yeah, I'd like to propose to table this code change proposal till our next meeting, just to give me a little more time to go through the proposed changes a little bit more.
Okay, that sounds like a motion.
I'll second it.
All right,
Justin.
second. Justin, okay. Motion second. Any additional discussion regarding this? Right. Hearing none. All those in favor of tabling discussion and action on this code change proposal until the next tag meeting, please say aye.
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 All those opposed or any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Right. Thanks for the discussion on this, and we'll pick it up at the next tag meeting. Let's go to the next one.
And this is the same as the previous one. It was a late poster. Came in with the other one.
John. And Mike, I think you were the proponent on this one as well. If you would be so kind to kind of provide a little bit more background on the intent and kind of what the proposed change would be doing here.
You bet. And thanks everybody for hearing that last one. If there are any questions in the interim, I'd be happy to respond to those. My emails and the contact information for the proposal. So this one is looking at just better aligning the current mechanical code and residential code eventually, because I have a similar proposal that'll be submitted there with the model code. with respect to what is considered distributed. So right now, the model code says that a system is considered distributed when it provides outdoor air to each bedroom and to one or more of the living room, dining room, and kitchen. And that is contrasted with Washington State, which requires distribution of outdoor air to each habitable space, which in parentheses includes interior adjacent rooms, interior adjoining spaces, and you need to exhaust air from all kitchens as well as bathrooms directly outside. So if this is one system that's exhausting air from kitchens as well as other spaces, that's a direct violation of the mechanical code, which requires that separate exhaust be provided for kitchens. You can't combine kitchen exhaust with environmental exhaust from like bathrooms. And so there's a problem right now with the definition as it exists within within Washington's code, and I'm trying to address that and align this definition better with the mechanical code. So I've basically done that with this definition of distributed whole house ventilation system. This is the same as the mechanical code at this point, the model code, I should say. And then not distributed, I'm proposing that we just define it as is a ventilation system that is not a distributed whole house ventilation system. So it's simple and it avoids confusion associated with, is there any middle ground between what is and what isn't a distributed whole house ventilation system? If you'll scroll down a little bit there, Krista, thank you. Then when this gets to, okay, the whole house ventilation fans, supply fan shall provide ducted outdoor air ventilation instead of to each habitable space within the residential dwelling unit. I'm proposing to say to each bedroom and to one or more of the following. Again, this is in alignment with the description of what is a distributed ventilation system in the model code. And then I've crossed out this exception for interior adjoining spaces, which would not be considered, one of these spaces, because once you remove habitable spaces and just replace it with bedroom, living room, dining room, or kitchen, all bedrooms, and then one of living room, dining room, or kitchen, then you don't need to address interior adjoining spaces anymore, because they aren't required to have outdoor air delivered directly to them. One example of an interior adjoining space, I think, would be, based on my understanding, would be like a bathroom that's a powder room that doesn't have a window to it. And if that is, or a laundry room or something like that, and if those are considered interior adjoining spaces, then providing supply outdoor air to them doesn't really make a whole lot of sense based on where people are located within the house during typical use. Let's go down a little bit more. Okay, and this is the same language here that we had up above. I think I'm seeing the same language that I saw up above. Is that what you guys are seeing there? 403, 442 was the other section, 403, 442 as well. Krista, if you scroll up just a little bit, it looks like it might have been repeated here. Okay. It's not the same. Okay. Okay, so one is whole house ventilation and group R2 occupancies, and the other one is for other than group R2 occupancies. Okay. So both of these need to be addressed, and that's why the language looks very similar, because it has very similar language, and it's just consistent with across both sections. Okay, so that's basically the proposal. In the rationale, I've got some information about looking at different studies out there where people spend their time in indwelling units, and basically if you're covering the spaces that are shown in this proposal that are required in the model code for distribution, you're hitting, well over, I think it's like 89, 90%, somewhere around there, of 89, 90% of the time you're delivering outdoor air to a room that that has a person in it when the place is occupied. So pretty good for distribution there, and just simpler to comply with, and fixes a problem right now that whole house distribution systems have to exhaust from the kitchens, which conflicts with the code right now. So if there are any questions, again, I'm happy to answer those.
All right, thanks, Mike, for going through that. Open it up for some discussion here. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, so the interior adjacent rooms and the interior adjoining spaces that we typically see are bedrooms and offices.
Okay.
Those are the typical ones that we would see in most residential multifamily layouts. So it's not typically that's not typically a space that's exhausted. It's typically a space that requires the ventilation. It could be a bedroom, it could be an office, it could be something like that. But those are the spaces that require by the building code to have the permanent opening. But we see most folks don't want to do the permanent opening option, so we've developed, different options for those in the code. So I think that part of it we need to definitely take a closer look at to understand what that looks like. And then I'm also just hesitant of dropping the habitable space language that we've had for the last 30 years in the state. So we might want to take a closer look at that somehow. Anyways.
Certainly, yeah. So in the case that an adjacent space is a bedroom, it would be covered under this. As I proposed it, outdoor air would be required to be delivered to it for it to be distributed. In the case that it's an office, I have not addressed that. So if there's a differentiation between an office and a bedroom and we want offices in, that could certainly be put into the list here. I think that I don't know, maybe there's a difference in a closet or something, but between the two types of rooms there. But that seems like a reasonable thing to include here as well. And then the habitable space, it just seemed like is so much broader than these rooms and can be, just about any place really. So that's what I was trying to avoid, is like having a requirement to ventilate to a laundry room, for example, supply outdoor air to a laundry room when your time in there is really low.
Yeah, I guess it's big enough. Yeah. Yeah,
Right,
closets, laundry rooms, or those habitable spaces. Got it. Yeah.
And I guess quick follow-up question, Eric, are you aware if the habitable space term is defined anywhere except as part of a definition of other terms currently?
I don't think so.
Defined in the building code,
Is it in the building code?
pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, right now in the mechanical code, it looks like it's somewhat defined as part of the definition for distributed whole house ventilation.
Yeah, it is defined in the building code. A space in a building for living, sleeping, eating, or cooking, bathrooms, toilet rooms, closets, halls, storage, or utility spaces or similar areas are not considered habitable spaces. So that's kind of been the language we've been using. I don't know, I went back to the 97 code, 97 Washington State VIAQ code, and that's been the term that we've used for at least the last 30 years or so. So
And where I think there's a confusion is that there's that parenthetical phrase there within the definition of distributed whole house ventilation. So if we scroll up to the top there, the Washington code includes interior adjacent rooms and interior adjoining spaces within that kind of description of what is considered a habitable space. So if we're considering those adjoining spaces and adjacent rooms, then that can be much broader than the definition of habitable space in the code.
yeah, so interior adjacent space and interior adjoining space are both, or interior adjacent room and interior adjoining space are both defined terms also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll want to take a look at those definitions.
Yeah, I mean, does it make sense to have that as part of within the habitable space classification as it is more of a broad term, I guess would be my question.
May I interject just for a second too?
Sure. Sorry,
I mean,
Jonathan.
no,
I saw
it's
you had
okay.
your hand up.
It's relevant information to this conversation, which I was trying to be very patient. But you know, in the energy code, we have referenced the primary living areas. Not that this is energy code. I'm saying that and that excludes typically like utility rooms, or such, or bathrooms, right? But the living rooms, family rooms, playrooms, offices, and those sort of spaces are considered the non-primary spaces. But my concern with all of this actually is the language here says one or more, and as an enforcement or an education doing technical code, one means that you only have to go to one of those spaces and you're deemed as compliance. And so that language should be changed, because then that could just deliver to just the living room, and that is one, and I would be compliant with my distribution.
Well, it says all bedrooms and one of the other three types, right? So
It just says one or more. And when you read his language in the green, it says one or more to it.
That's correct. That's the intent of the proposal, to align with the IMC and IRC model codes in that regard. And that is each bedroom and one or more of the following. So you don't have to do living room, dining room, and kitchen. You just have to do living room, dining room, or kitchen. Typically, if you're doing living room, you're getting the kitchen too, based on open concept layouts, and then the dining room is often connected to the kitchen as well. So you're probably getting air to all three of those spaces in typical layouts, if you're delivering it to one.
how does it work for a studio if your bedroom is your living room? You have to do
Right,
two
then you're
spaces. You have
covered.
to have two girls.
So, I mean, if you remove the one or more and just said into the following spaces, at least that those spaces would be included. I'm telling you from enforcement side, I'm going to get 500 calls on the hotline about this. It says one, and then and that's what they'll do. And the other spaces won't get ventilation when they're separated off. Not all homes have great room concepts.
That is true, yes. And again, this
Or
is just to be
dwellings, not
consistent.
homes. I apologize. This is the IMC. The wrong term was thrown out there.
Right, and this is just to be, again, consistent with the model code and how they approach this. And 62.2 doesn't require any distribution at all. But of course, Washington is more advanced than that. And if you're, especially in an apartment, you know, if you're delivering air to the outdoor air to the living room, dining room, or kitchen, it's really, I don't know. I don't think that you're running into situations where you're not distributing that outdoor air significantly or sufficiently, I should say, in such a small space.
To Jonathan's point, I think if it said each bedroom and living room, dining room, or kitchen, or tells you that you have the choice of doing one or more, and that's more, I mean, I'm sure you copied this right out of the model code, but I think what I've seen in Washington is taking out those other words that Jonathan indicated. Is that fair to say, Jonathan? No. Enough said.
I had a quick run to an emergency that was out of my office space, so I couldn't hit the unmute button. Dogs, what can you do? It's just, you know, as the current code states that the ventilation systems work, it's supposed to be to each habitable space, right? But there's a whole bunch of exemptions in the code. I shouldn't say exemptions. There's a whole bunch of quality adjustment factors based on when you don't want to distribute to those spaces. So what would that do to this as well? Will we get rid of the distributed and non-distributed quality adjustment factors in the code?
No, those would still apply. I'm not proposing to remove those at all. I'm just proposing to change the definition of distributed. So it's less costly to comply. So you wouldn't have to duct it to each one of these, each habitable space right now. Also, you you would be able to comply with the code by not exhausting from the kitchen with your whole house ventilation system, which is prohibited. So it's those two things. First off, you don't have to exhaust from the kitchen anymore, which the code prohibits anyway. Secondly, you don't have to provide it to each habitable space, because habitable space, especially with this parenthetical phrase here in the definition of distributed, I mean, there are a whole lot of areas that this applies to that are beyond even the definition of habitable space. And also, you've got pretty good distribution if you're just doing the model code distribution route. And there are a lot of builders that build across, Washington State and other states as well. So the more we can comply with the model code and still get, acceptable and good results, the better.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but there is language in the other states that do allow them to exhaust and they exhaust from the kitchen as in part of the fresh air, but they're required to have a grease recycling trap over the range stove. So this exhaust here isn't part of the range hood device. This whole house ventilation here is about transferring fresh air to spaces and not exhausting pollutants out.
Okay, but exhaust from the kitchen is required as part of the distributed system, right? If you scroll up, Krista, to the definition, the whole house system has to exhaust from the kitchen as well. And that's kind of counter to where the code's trying to go with ensuring better capture efficiency from the kitchen exhaust, and not low continuous ventilation rates, but higher ventilation rates that have better capture efficiency during the time of a cooking event.
So the Washington State Code requires both the local exhaust above the cooking appliance, and you could have, exhaust, general room exhaust in the kitchen also if you wanted. But yeah, I understand by removing the general exhaust from the kitchen, it allows you, more flexibility on the adjustment factors. So yeah, I think there's definitely some good cleanup here. We just have to decide how we want the language to look, and yeah, maybe this is a separate working group to work through it. So
yeah, I'm not in disagreement. I would like it to be clear enough that it's already very confusing for folks. I get an astronomical amount of mechanical questions as it relates to residential properties. And I am no mechanical expert, which is why I've been participating last 2 code cycles, learned by drinking from a fire hose. But I do teach a lot of classes on this, and it talks about distribution, but you're only taking a 25% penalty, which typically doesn't even increase the size of your exhaust fan for doing so if you don't want to distribute. So if you don't like distributing to all those areas and it's a pain for you, that's fine. Just times it by 1.25 and you have a higher CFM, which typically does not move your fan size up at all that you're purchasing, and you're still in compliance.
Good point. I think that Brown's concern here was that that the exhaust fan, or sorry, the HERV rates, if they could reduce it, so get a distributed system and reduce the HERV rates, then the systems can become more affordable for multifamily housing, for dwelling units, and it's just that much more affordable and cost effective, and those kind of things. If it doesn't have to be distributed, so distributed, I guess I should say, as is the requirement now, and exhausting from so many places. Just multifamily dwelling units, smaller, more cost effective. But you're right. Sometimes the 25% reduction in airflow isn't going to get you a step size down.
Thank you for the discussion. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I like the idea of a separate working group. I need a little time to look through this. I kind of want to understand better. I'm pretty dialed into how the code is written, and I kind of support Jonathan with changes. As I can kind of envision a lot of confusion, and I kind of want to talk through and get a group together and talk through this a little bit more as far as where we want to go with this, and maybe present it, better to the team. So I'd be, available to be part of that study group.
All right. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea to me as well. Shailesh, good.
So I thought that whole house is more supplying adequate oxygen to the space, and the local exhaust is removing toxin from the space. And then based on that, we can decide the rooms and the area where we need adequate oxygen supply and where we want to remove toxins.
And I guess, do you think there's something that would make more sense to adjust the proposed or current language to kind of align with that, or is it you're just kind of making a statement regarding that? I think in general, I would agree, but I'm wondering,
No, I'm just making a statement. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's a good point though. Right. So yeah, it sounds like maybe some further discussion and work is needed on this one. So look, Laura kind of volunteered to participate. Is there anyone else that would like to participate in a working group to get through this? Allie. Good.
Yeah, I would be interested in being part of that group.
Okay. Jonathan.
Yes, the same. I just raised my hand as I'm volunteering. I figured that's what was happening when the hand started raising, that we were all volunteering.
Not going to presume, but yeah, thanks for volunteering. Nick.
Yeah, I'd love to be a part of that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Mike, I'm assuming you're also.
Yes, I'm available, sir.
Right. And Eric as well, I'm guessing. All right, fantastic. Written your names down, so yeah, we'll try to send out something shortly to those who are interested, and report back at the next tech meeting.
All right, thank you.
All right, great. So I guess I'd entertain a motion to table this one, similar to the previous proposal. Move on.
So moved.
All right. Sounded like Justin.
Oh, no, you do it yourself. You're doing fine. I'll second the motion.
All right, second from Laura. Okay. We have a motion and a second to table this item till the next tag meeting, and as we previously discussed, we'll have the working group to dive into it a little bit more. Any other discussion regarding this item? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thanks for the discussion, and let's continue on.
And David was not available today and just submitted some rationale.
And my understanding is that there's a parallel, or it's all within the same proposal for the IFC and IBC as
Correct.
well. And this is addressing smoke control wiring. And I believe he did send in a written statement. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm trying to find it here.
Okay. And if you're trying to look at this one, note that the section numbering changed for 2024. So this is, if you're looking at the 2021 code, this would be section 513.
So this is what he submitted on behalf of the IFC tag.
Right, and this is this from the Washington State tag or from the ICC tag?
This first portion is from the Washington IFC tag, or from representative of the IFC tag. And then the rest of it after that first page is directly out of the ICC proposal process. And this is also on the website.
And like, maybe Krista, can you clarify, like from the ICC info included, that's where that would be for the next code cycle, or is this taken from what was discussed for the model code draft that we're looking at?
No, this is for the 2027.
Okay, thanks. That's what I was assuming. And I guess similar to the two proposals we just discussed, was this also submitted when we did the review at the council and committee for tag deferral?
It just, for some reason, it made it onto the IBC and IFC list, but it was not present on the IMC list.
Okay.
Even though it addressed the IMC, so it was added probably within a day or two, added to the IMC list within a day or two of that council meeting.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. All right. Yeah, can you maybe hop back to the proposal? I don't know if anyone had any initial thoughts here. Eric, good.
So just to clear, so this is just correlation between the codes, essentially. This is a 2027 IFC proposal that we're bringing into the 2024 codes. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct.
And
That's
so
what
this
they're
is,
looking to do.
yeah, so this is covered under the fire committee at the ICC level. Okay, understood. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, and it sounds like that the IFC tag has previously reviewed this and recommended adoption, it sounds like, for
Yeah.
the Washington State Fire Code.
And along that line, there will be a codes correlation tag meeting on Tuesday. And the council is currently looking for volunteers from this tag to serve on that committee or attend that meeting as well. So if there is anybody available, we would love some volunteers to attend.
I apologize. What was that date again?
That was next Tuesday, so that's the 19th.
You know, I will attend, but I wouldn't say that you want to rely on me to be your mechanical expert, but I will be there to help for sure. I am available if necessary.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anyone else? They originally asked for 5, and I thought that was a little unreasonable, but that would be a pretty large group.
Sorry, Chris, did you mention the time of that?
I did not, because I just found out about it.
Okay, and yeah, good job working it into the proposal review.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's been added to the agenda yet, or added to the
Okay.
meeting schedule yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, myself, I'll try to make it for sure. I don't know if that's already required for the tag chairs, but I will try to be there.
Okay.
Krista, who is the proponent of this proposal at the ICC level? Does it say? Robert Marshall.
The FCAC,
Okay.
so the Fire Code Advisory Committee from ICC.
Yeah, I don't have any comments on the language. It seems pretty consistent with what folks are enforcing, so.
I guess my comment was it's interesting that they're noting a cost decrease in the ICC proposal. I'm curious on the rationale behind that. But I think it was in like the referenced ICC proposal, and then okay, yeah, there you go. Brad, good.
Yeah, the only big changes I see in there from what I see standard now is probably the building management system for like HVAC controls, where their control wiring would have to be in conduit or protected, which could be a cost impact. Just because right now they're running that typically exposed through drop ceilings or mechanical spaces. But if there is any control function coming from the building management system, all that wiring now would have to be in conduit. So I don't know if you guys are getting that from that, but it's kind of what I see in my limited time getting to look at this. So
I think that's a valid point. And it's a question of like how for systems that are somewhat interacting with the smoke control system, to what extent do you need to have it integrated into these requirements?
I mean, typical stairway and elevator shaft pressurization systems only have to comply with specific sections of 909. So I'd have to chase down if this would even apply to that, or it's only a full-blown smoke control system. Because this is part of 909, I guess 12. So it's not going to apply to a typical control system just yet, but definitely if you're using a BMS control system that's part of a smoke control system, it's going to have to meet all the UL listings and everything else. So.
Brad, did you have another comment, or did you still have your hand up?
no, I just don't know what I'm doing.
Okay.
Try and put it down.
I don't know. I think the Zoom features are tricky for everyone at this point.
I can do that.
Thank you. All right. Any additional discussion, or do we want to provide a motion to follow along, or is there other discussion or investigation needed?
Would you consider a drop down ceiling a raceway?
I don't think I would, if you're asking me, but
Would it be difficult to create a small section of those drop down ceilings to be raceways instead of the large amount of cost he has in conduit? Could like leftover building materials meet that requirement? I'm not very familiar with the smoke and system installations. Just not a fire guy.
I'll take a risk at answering that. I would say no. You'd be changing the whole electrical code to try and make a drop down ceiling a chaseway or electrical conduit. So
I mean, I was trying to say that there's a way to make a section of the drop down ceiling into a raceway, being sealed and appropriate for the fire code, not to have the whole ceiling. Because it doesn't here a raceway, so all you need is a channel that meets the fire code, is my understanding. Am I incorrect with this? Some sort of fully assembly, 6-sided assembly that has at least a 1 hour fire rating?
I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I think in the letter, I think it was noted that raceway is not a defined term, and I think it was like item 3 in the letter. And I guess the justification was that by adding in the other options, it provides additional means for AHJs to provide enforcement. Oh, sorry, it was, yeah, up there, item 3. Yeah. Laura.
Do we want to just hold off on this code change proposal until after, it sounds like there's a meeting on Tuesday, sounds like. So do we just want to table this code change proposal till then?
Yeah,
Well,
and
they're kind of looking for our recommendation on.
Oh, a recommendation from us. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have much input on this one.
and I guess would it make sense to defer the requirements to the fire or building code? And I think the building code is, they have a tag meeting going on right now as well, and this is one of the items that I believe they're supposed to be looking at. So they may find the same as the fire tag did and recommend adoption, or they may be doing something different with it. But yeah, like Krista said, I think it would be helpful if the mechanical tag could provide some direction one way or another on what the tag would recommend for this.
And I think it would be fine to defer to their expertise and make the correlating changes to the mechanical code.
Okay, well, yeah, I can make a motion to defer this code change proposal to the building code or even the fire code tag teams to see if they can provide some direction.
All right, Brad, good. Are you making a second, I guess?
yeah, I'm just gonna make a real thing. My thing, I guess it really wasn't in opposition. It was just the fact of where I seen it could have been opened up to a whole nother scope of work that most people wouldn't have thought about in a fire system. And that was more of my point of talking out was there's a whole nother side they mentioned there besides just what you would think of normal smoke and fire. It's not in opposition to it. It's just getting people thinking about that side of it. So that's all.
All right, thanks, Brad. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So there's a motion on the table to go along with building or fire code tag findings for this item. Is there a second for that?
I super apologize. What is the motion on the table? I was researching raceways like an ADHD person.
The motion is to kind of defer recommendation on this code change proposal to the fire or building code tag findings. All right, so I don't hear a second. Is there anyone that would like to speak to why we would not take that approach, or if there's a different approach that any of the tag members would recommend?
Was there a mechanical tag approach?
That's what we're discussing right now. If we want to recommend adopting it, recommend providing maybe a clarification on the proposed change, or recommending not adopting it as written. So we're reviewing this proposed change and providing just kind of the recommendation from our technical advisory group on what the State Building Code Council should do with the proposed change, to if it should be moved forward into the further rulemaking or not.
I'll second that.
All
I
right,
did
so,
I did do
okay.
some deep dive in research on this, and they talk about boxes to fiberglass to lots of different potential systems being used as raceways. Just in case people are hung up on that, because I was really concerned adding costs. It is a thing, and the gentleman talked about a new scope of work that may be included by this, and it has lots. And since our raceways weren't defined, I was very curious at how costly that impact would be. And there's about 20 references on this page of different types of raceways, from galvanized steel to non-metallic conduit to flexible metal conduit to I can keep going. Non-metallic conduit ground surfaces, liquid flexible metallic coatings. You get the idea. So there's lots of ways to make a continuous raceway from what I'm reading here.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks, Jonathan. So we have a motion from Laura and a second from Jonathan on it. Shailesh, good.
Are this same language in the fire code that we are just duplicating here, or we are adding additional language?
Currently, my understanding is the language between the building code, fire code, and the mechanical code is the same. Yeah,
So if it is not in a mechanical code, it will be still the same language in the fire code. So if we don't, this is more for information for mechanical engineers, then the fire people, when they do the review, they will have the same comment.
right. So yeah, there's some duplication here for requirements, and I mean the section in the mechanical code for the smoke control requirements. There is a lot of redundancy. It's my understanding between the codes, and but I guess, Shailesh, I mean, do you see an issue with that, or
Well,
do you think it's
if this is required by other code,
Mhm.
and if it is listed here for just helpful information, duplicating is not a problem. If it is creating a conflict between fire code and mechanical code, then we need to resolve between the two code bodies, and then we fix the fire code as well as mechanical code in that case.
Got it. Yeah, and I think like Kristen mentioned, there's going to be the meeting next week to start looking at some of these code correlation items. So there aren't those competing requirements. But as proposed currently, it looks like they do have the same language for all three codes. All right. Any additional discussion here, or take a quick vote on the motion on the table? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of deferring recommendation for this code change proposal to the findings of the building and fire code tags, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right. Right. So this next one is one that I submitted on behalf of the tag for section 601.5. This is regarding return error openings. We had some discussion when we're reviewing some of the model code changes as well as the existing amendments for this section on return error location requirements and what like also kind of around what is classified as a return error system and where these can be located. So I tried to put something in here to hopefully kind of at least create a placeholder for some discussion, but definitely want to have some input from the tag on this and see if we want to refine this any further. But the thought was that to provide a little bit more clarification on where return error could be taken, I put in the proposed exception for this section regarding non-recirculating air distribution systems like a ERV, and providing the allowance that should not be prohibited from obtaining return air from bathroom, toilet room, kitchen, garage, furnace room, or closet for air that's just being routed outside of the building and passed through the heat exchanger. And I think we had, as the tag, we had kind of looked at some like different sections, and the model code had added in some language here that we had some discussion around. So leave it there. Shailesh, good.
So return air is something that is reconditioned, right?
Not per the definition in chapter 2.
Or if this air we are taking from places where it is not allowed to recirculate, it could be an exhaust air in that case.
That's correct. So the chapter 2 definition for return air is air removed from an approved condition space or location and recirculated or exhausted.
Oh, so that or exhausted is an issue then in that case, return air.
Right. So that was kind of part of the the question is if these return air requirements in this section would apply to a system like an ERV, and we would obviously not want to prohibit like an ERV system from drying air from a bathroom or someplace like that where we want to utilize that exhaust air for energy recovery. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do remember that, that we talked about this as a tag, and, yeah, I support this, code change proposal, and, so I can go ahead and make a motion to accept the code change proposal, and I think, yeah, I'll suggest that we accept it as written.
All right, motion on the table. Is there a second?
Sure, this is Kevin.
Second, Kevin, thanks. All right. Any additional discussion for this proposed change? And I'll note like that there's going to be additional public comment period for all of these proposed changes that we're forwarding on. So no, by no means it's the final language. Jonathan, good.
I do know that some manufacturers had issues with their ERVs doing a defrost cycle and recirculating air, which is why some of the manufacturers are proposing that you don't take with an ERV spaces out of wet rooms. Has that been considered with this?
Yeah, I guess I tried to put in
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did try to put in the non-recirculating part to eliminate that potential, but that, yeah, that's a good point that some ERVs will potentially use some recirculator to prevent or use it for defrosting the heat exchanger.
Maybe add something for defrost cycles in the language. I don't know. I just don't want to prohibit a certain product from being used because it uses a small defrost cycle. Or I'm saying, I would say that I would really see. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. I'd like to see that the product gets installed to the manufacturer specifications. If they don't want to put in the bathrooms and stuff because their product does a defrost cycle, then that should be acceptable.
Got it. Eric, go ahead.
Trying to remember the exact code section, but I think it's in what, chapter 5, that there's a allowance for that, right, up to 10%.
I think it might be in chapter 4.
It's in, yeah, well, it's in several locations, but as far as the ERVs go, there's a section 513.4 recirculated air. Air conveyed within energy recovery systems shall not be considered as recirculated air where the energy recovery ventilation system is construction to limit cross leakage between air streams to less than 10% of the design. Total design capacity, and then there's the other chapter 4 references in the table that kind of correlate with that also. So I don't know if that covers this condition, but I'd recommend leaving this as general as possible and not getting very specific.
Great. Yeah, so Jonathan, I don't know if you had any suggested edits at this time for this section, or you could submit them later.
No, I will be honest, my English is terrible. I just wanted to make sure that was taken into consideration with the proposal, that we did at least cover this for those manufacturers that do have issues for those certain spaces. That was all.
Any other discussion here? All right. Okay. So the motion is to recommend adopting the proposal as shown. I'll All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. No. Let's see. So the next one is another one that we had discussed and I had submitted on behalf of the tag regarding control wiring in duct systems. So this was a new model code section that got added, I believe. And we had had some discussion on the requirements for this and where it particularly would not make sense for some existing conditions where you're, for instance, doing like a rooftop unit replacement or something like that. It would be burdensome to have to replace all the existing control wiring that may have already been routed in a duct system or something. So that's what I had put in as an exception number 2 there. Shailesh, go ahead.
So here we say permitted to be installed, or you want to say to be left in place. So install meaning reinstall, or left in place, is that what you are referring to? Meaning they don't have to change.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So yeah, I think I would revise that to say shall be permitted to be left in place or reconnected. And then maybe just reconnected to newly installed air distribution systems. And delete the last part of that sentence. Or reconnected to newly installed. Right. And I think Brad, I think you were one of the ones that had spoken to this item previously. So I don't know if you had any comments on if this made sense for hopefully
I think,
allowing.
yeah, I think it
this
did. It
version.
was directly related to package unit changeouts, and um, I- since the, I don't know, probably 80s, they've been running the duct thermostat wire up in the ductwork and up through into the package unit. On new installs, we've gotten completely away from that, but on these change outs, it could be that was the impact of having to either replace that wire or put in a wireless kit module that would then connect the two, so that was the impact that I directly knew about that I could think of. So, and that's where I was coming from on that. So,
Yeah, and that was the purpose of writing this one. So yeah, thanks for confirming that. Okay. Any other discussion for this or entertain them? Oh, Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember talking about this, and so I'll make a motion to accept the change proposal as written with this new exception for existing control wiring.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second from Brad. Great. Any further discussion on this code change proposal?
Yeah, is that accepted as modified?
Yeah, I believe that was the
Yeah,
motion from
that's what
Laura.
he said.
Okay, thank you.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor of recommending adopting the code change proposal as modified as shown here, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, thank you. All right, so I think all the remaining ones we have on the agenda are regarding refrigerants and chapter 11. So Eric, I know you submitted these, so feel free to take it away. And I don't know if we want to go in order or there's other approach here, but
Yeah, let's just go with, I guess, the order on the agenda unless I haven't tried to reorder things, so. Yeah, so there's a number of code proposals to work through changes in ASHRAE 15 to try to correlate them to the mechanical code. There were 17 different interpretation questions that were responded to by the state building code back in September. I guess those were posted probably sometime in October. So if you haven't reviewed those are a good reference to some of this background information. So this specific code proposal is an attempt to clarify code requirements between ASHRAE 15 and IMC Chapter 11. As we know, the 2021 version, the big changes that you have to comply with both IMC Chapter 11 and with ASHRAE 15. ASHRAE 15, the current version is 2022, though there are dozens of addenda to that to address all the new refrigerants. So hopefully this one is mostly pointers and we can kind of walk through these item by item. So the first item I'm trying to clarify is item 8.6 is just for the relief devices, as it hasn't been in the past, the refrigerant discharge reliefs. And then adding items 8.8 and 8.9 to provide more clear language for the natural ventilation and mechanical exhaust discharge outlets for discharge for the A2L and B2L refrigerants and which sections you specifically have to go to. There is a pointer from Chapter 11 back to this section, but there's really no pointer that tells you which item you have to comply with. Some people think you need to comply with product conveying. Some people have been thinking other things. ASHRAE 15 is very clear that, any of these shaft ventilation systems, the discharge point has to comply, at least for the exhaust discharge points, has to comply with the refrigerant relief section in ASHRAE 15, and we'll see that section later. Section 8.9 is for item 8.9 is for the A2, B2, A3, and B3 refrigerants that have slightly different sectional, well, I guess it ended up being the same sectional references here, but you can only use the mechanical exhaust for those refrigerant types. There is no natural ventilation option, so those are slightly different pointers. Let's keep rolling through this. These are just sections for reference. The next item, yeah, that 1104.3.5 is a new proposed section. So with the A2L there are very restrictive requirements for public corridors and lobbies for the amount of refrigerant that can be in the refrigerating system. As part of ASHRAE 15, I think it's like 1 pound of refrigerant or something, very small threshold. So this is a pointer to that section so folks know about it. As I said, we have to comply with both 15 and the IMC now. So this is meant to provide awareness to this section for these very limited quantities of refrigerants that are allowed for refrigeration systems in the corridor. I'll just keep rolling through these. So 1105.7, so the mechanical code has had slightly different language than ASHRAE 15 for a long time for these refrigerant relief locations. Again, in the past, this only applied to actual refrigerant reliefs, like on a water-cooled chiller or something where you're piping a relief out. In this case, this is now extended to these refrigerant piping shaft ventilation discharge outlets. And so there is a lot of new ASHRAE language. So all this language comes from ASHRAE 15, 2022 to provide the appropriate criteria and correlate there. Just keep moving on unless there's questions. I guess stop me.
Yeah, Eric, I don't know how many of these you were taken from the proposed ICC changes as well for the 2027 code. I don't know if
Yeah,
this
these
was one
ones
of
are
them.
not ICC changes, no.
Okay, right.
But they are in ASHRAE 15. So I don't, yeah, section 1109 2.5 refrigerant pipe shafts. Just adding a pointer that if we have these naturally or mechanically ventilated shafts throughout our buildings, that those walls are part of the building envelope walls and need to be separated with thermal insulation and air barrier construction per the energy code. So that's a clarification. That's again not part of any model code change. Excuse me. There is a separate proposal for exception 2 of this section, as I'm just including it here for reference. That is an 2027 IMC change that changes that exception to match the ASHRAE 15 language. So ASHRAE 15 does not have the words using group A1 refrigerant. And so you can use any type of refrigerant as long as you can dump that charge in the smallest occupied space through which the piping passes. So, so that's just to correlate. Again, there's a whole separate proposal for that in case this one doesn't get traction. The next one is an ASHRAE 15 and the IMC are both silent on how to deal with natural ventilation openings for refrigerant piping enclosures. So this is an attempt to establish some rule on these naturally ventilated closures on exterior of the building to route refrigerant piping. So I'm proposing a 3-foot separation from operable openings into the building. And so that is, and that the enclosures have to comply with section 1109.3.2 below if you're mechanically ventilating. So then the shaft ventilation. So this is the section that governs the A2L and B2L, and in the 2024 code, this is slightly different than the 2021 code. You've been reviewing that. So both the A2, A3, B2, and B3 refrigerants are now combined into the same section for shaft ventilation. So they've kind of they've reduced the number of sections here, but they say that the certain types of refrigerants there have to be mechanically ventilated and have the refrigerant leak detector. So again, yeah, these are clarifications. The shaft natural ventilation discharge outlets. shall comply with that 501.3 section. We've now got the specific pointers and with the 1105.7. So we've got that pointer also. As an editorial thing there, Krista, that the word section in front of 501.3.1 should be sections. There should be an S on that, but it's up a little higher in the paragraph there, third line, fourth line down. Yeah, there you go. The makeup air opening at the top of the shaft, that is a clarification that is out of ASHRAE 15. So again, that's a statement that's in 15 that's not in the IMC. And then the next clarification, the makeup air for the mechanical ventilated shafts is also a part of ASHRAE 15 that's not part of the IMC. And then we are proposing, so exception 2 here is from a 2027 codes change proposal. I also have a completely separate code change proposal for that one in case the rest of this language doesn't get traction, but I'm just kind of giving you a complete look here. And then the very last item, 1110.2 is something that came up in the Seattle code process for the 2021 codes, which was if you have pre-insulated factory insulated refrigerant piping line sets, that you don't have to expose that insulation in the field to inspect the pipe and pipe. So this section requires both the refrigerant pipe and the joints to be installed in the field and exposed for visual inspection. So so the piping portion does not need to be exposed for factory installed piping systems. That's all I have. If there's questions, I'm here to respond to them.
Right. Thanks, Eric. And yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if we stated the background on this, but when the 2024 IMC was written, like the ASHRAE 15 2022 requirements were still in progress. So there's a pretty big lack of integration into that IMC model code. So my understanding is that the intent here is really just to bring things up to speed and in line with what the current ASHRAE requirements would have.
Great.
Right. Any discussion on kind of what's being proposed here, and then Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say, I've spent some time in ASHRAE 15 and, I think, I think Eric's done a good job in bringing this up to the ASHRAE 15 standards, and I don't really have any issues with this code change proposal and bringing the IMC in alignment with ASHRAE 15. So based on what I've read, it seems like it seems to be a good approach to have it align with it. So I'm in support of it. I guess that's what I have to share.
Thanks, Laura. All right, any other questions or comments regarding kind of any specific items here or general thoughts?
Yeah, this is Kevin. I had a question about, I think it was the natural ventilation portion. There were
There's kind of, yeah, there's the exterior enclosures, which could be naturally ventilated, or there's the interior shafts that, well, yeah, what's your question, Kevin?
so you said something about ASHRAE 15 is silent about this. Where did the basis for this text come from?
Yeah, scroll down to the section, yeah, that one, yeah, I guess exception 3. So you're allowed to run refrigerant piping located on the exterior of the building where vented to outside. ASHRAE 15 and the IMC do not provide any guidance as to what is vented to the outside. What does that mean? It's, you know, does 1 square inch of venting to the outside constitute venting to the outside, or is it more than that? Do the ventilation openings have to be, you know, evenly distributed? If you're running up a 40-story building, you know, where do you have to vent that? Yeah, there's definitely VRF manufacturers and other manufacturers that are developing guidance on that, but right now both ASHRAE 15 and the IMC are silent on how to do that properly. So this is mostly, it says you got to distribute your natural ventilation opens vertically. I don't give I'm not proposing giving guidance on a minimum free area or whatnot. And then I'm saying that you got to keep those openings at least 3 feet from a window. That was kind of based on natural gas and, you know, how far we have to keep a natural gas meter outlet from an operable window. So that's where that 3 feet came from, operable opening.
Cool. No, that makes sense. Good reasoning. I was just curious. Thank you.
And then, yeah, providing a pointing that if you're mechanically ventilating, then you got to basically comply with the shaft provisions. So
cool. Thank you.
The one thing I have learned is with the refrigerant piping, with the A2L refrigerants, you cannot add odor to the refrigerant, and so it is different than running natural gas piping through a building. So.
All right, and Eric, you had mentioned that some of the other proposals that you had were, are they pieces of this one, or are they kind of distinct ideas and have other items incorporated?
Yeah, I think there are other pieces to those proposals that are straight from the 2027 IMC language, especially for the 15.2 one. It's more just so you have kind of a complete look at what these sections would look like to correlate with those 2027 IMC proposals. So
Got it.
It's pretty minor on the duplicated text, just a couple of things. So.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, yeah, this obviously there's a lot of content here, so I don't know if anyone on the tag is wanting to take more time to review, or if ready to provide some recommendations or other action on this proposal, or we could potentially look at some of the other pieces of this or other proposals around this the A2L refrigerant concept. So yeah, I guess is there any tag members prepared to make a motion on this, or have other questions or other thoughts on how we can proceed? Laura. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm okay with making a motion to accept the code change proposal as written.
Okay. All right. Motion from Laura. Is there a second for that one?
This is Bill. I'll second that.
All right. All right. Any discussion on the motion? And Shadish, go ahead.
So 2027 IMC code change proposal based on that, but are those proposals accepted, or what if they are not accepted in IMC?
Correct. Those proposals have not yet been reviewed, as far as I know.
So we are a little bit ahead, or?
Yeah, we're also going to be reviewing tomorrow with the council potentially adopting some of this language for the 2021 codes. So
Okay.
yeah, we definitely need this to be able to construct buildings. There's a lot of people spending a lot of time looking at ASHRAE 15 and not connecting the dots here. So anyways, like we said, we have 17 opinions from the State Building Code Council right now on a lot of these topics, which are providing some direction. But yeah, again, this is kind of just the first step in this process. Obviously, you know, from this step, it's going to go through council and through public review and whatnot. So we have time to make adjustments if the 2027 IMC proposals were to change. Those 2027 IMC proposals are coming from the ASHRAE 15 committee itself. And so, you know, it's pretty solid language.
Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe we should hold off then, and maybe I should just table the motion or amend the motion to I guess just to hold off until our next meeting, until we hear what happens tomorrow, because I did see Eric's email about the meeting tomorrow. Why don't we hold off to see where things kind of land there?
There won't be any determinations made tomorrow. It's just kind of the initial airing, and then we wouldn't be looking at it again until December sometime.
Yeah, if this
Probably
were to
around
pass
the 20th.
yeah, I think if this were to pass today, it would strengthen the discussion tomorrow that this is pretty solid language. So, but if not, then we'll just say it's still in progress. So.
Correct. So yeah, go ahead, Laura.
I was gonna say the verbiage that includes the 2027 IMC code changes. If we were to include everything except minus that, Eric, what would that look like?
Well, it's that one statement you're looking at there where it says getting rid of using group A1 refrigerant. So, I mean, that's in ASHRAE 15 already. That's not an addendum to 22. It's in ASHRAE 15 2022 proper. And then there's also the only other piece that's really is at the very end where there's that reference to ASHRAE 15.2. That's just an exception. So anyway.
Okay, so it's already it's in ASHRAE. It's in ASHRAE 15 currently. So
yeah.
So if we okay, so if we approve it as is, the likelihood of it being carried through, we kind of anticipate it occurring. So All right, maybe I'll just leave my motion as is to accept the change proposal as written.
Any other comments here? The motion on the table. Right. I guess I think there's a small editorial change that was made, so I'm assuming the motion includes that editorial change that we made. I forgot where it was, but it's just like adding an S somewhere. But Laura and Kevin, I don't know if that was your intent, but yeah, there is
Yeah.
sections. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, let's go ahead and do a quick voice vote. All those in favor of recommending adopting this code change proposal as written with uh, editorial edits, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. Oh, sorry.
Just a note, I wasn't the second on that one.
Oh, were you not? Bill, it was Bill, sorry. Thank you for clarifying that. And Bill, you're okay with that editorial amendment?
Yes, I am.
All right. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? All right, motion carries, thank you.
Okay, Ben, if we can go out of order, I'd recommend going to item 13 on the agenda. Because that one and then back to item 12, because those are the quick ones that are duplicates in that proposal. So not this one, I guess, Krista. Item 110.
GP1 109.
Yeah, 109 and 110 are the two that are probably easy to get off the plate in the last couple minutes, starting with 110. And I do have to leave at 4 today, so I can't extend longer. So which one is this? 110. So this is the one I mentioned that strikes the 4 words. I did submit this as a separate proposal in case the editorial language didn't come through. This proposal does have the backup language, as I mentioned. These 4 words are not in ASHRAE 15 2022, and the ASHRAE 15 committee has submitted a code change proposal to remove them from the 2027 IMC. So, and I guess I would like this one to go through separately in case the other one gets resistance as a parallel path would be my recommendation. So.
Got it. Yeah. So thanks for clarifying this. And I guess if I don't hope everyone read through this, but my understanding on the intent is that this reduces the restriction for refrigerants and kind of allows the design analysis to be done for A2L and other refrigerants for installation purposes to really greatly provide more flexibility for installation. My understanding.
Yeah, it's hard to comply with both ASHRAE 15 and ASHRAE and the IMC when they're in conflict with each other. So.
Yeah. Laura, good.
Yeah, this code change proposal makes sense to me, and so I'll make a motion to accept this code change proposal as written.
Right. Laura, is there a second for that one?
That's Bill. I'll second that one as well.
Right. Second for Bill. Right. Any additional discussion regarding this proposed change? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor of recommending adopting the code change proposal as shown, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries.
So yeah, this proposal is 109. Again, this is also a 2027 IMC proposal. The ASHRAE 15.2 standard is a new standard that was developed for single-family homes, as well as refrigeration systems installed in multifamily dwelling units, where the system, like a mini split heat pump, only serves a single dwelling unit, so it's not allowed to serve more than one dwelling or sleeping unit within the multifamily structure. So the 2027 IMC will, all this language is again from the ASHRAE 15 committee, and hasn't gone through the public review process, but is the language that's being proposed to provide the correlation to ASHRAE 15.2 2022. So yeah, this again provides more flexibility, and this standard's more tailored towards the single family homes and or the multifamily, so you don't have to review the entire ASHRAE 15 standard. It's tailored to just those occupancy types. So the first statement, yeah, either comply with ASHRAE 15 or 15.2 as applicable. And then there's a reference to this in the piping materials section of 1107.4 and the pipe fitting section of 1107.5. And then there's an exception in 1109.2.7 for the piping identification requirements that have to be followed. Again, I think there's changes in this section in the 2024 code. And then there's clarifications for this exception for the shaft ventilation. So essentially, you're allowed to have a shaft, but that shaft does not have to be vented, as long as you do not have any pipe fittings within the rated shaft. And so it's a little bit different provisions than the ASHRAE 15 provisions. And then there's the requirements for 15.2, or just adding the reference to 15.2 2022. So again, all this is the exact language from the ASHRAE 15 committee proposal for the 2027 IMC. Thanks.
Thanks. Justin, good.
Can you roll up to 1107.4, please? Sorry, I thought I had unclicked myself. Right there. So copper alley, it should be alloy. It's a little edit to do there.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you. Typo. So
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, ALL. Oops. Yeah, there you go.
All right. Any other comments here? I think the proposal had included the 2027 proposed changes to the IMC model code as part of it, so you can reference those. But yeah, like Eric said, looks like it's the exact same language. Laura? Go ahead.
I think, I think I need a little more time on this one. I don't think I've gotten to this, so, gosh, we're 3 hours into this, so, I'd like to, is there a way we can table this one and just, I don't think I haven't had a chance to look at this one, so, I'd suggest that we just maybe look at this and put this at the top of next time, and I'll be able to, take a look at it for next time, but yeah, I want to have a little time to look at this before saying it's okay.
Okay, sounds like you're making a motion to table this item.
Yeah.
There's a second for that?
This would just not reject it entirely. This would give us a little bit longer review for the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would be part of the agenda for the next meeting.
And is this a conversation that's going to be part of tomorrow's? Because I was listening and saying that some of this was important for tomorrow and some of it was not. Like, is this something we should really dig into, or could this wait until after some of the fallout of tomorrow's meetings?
It's probably just fine. I just haven't had a chance to look at and compare the IMC with the ASHRAE 15. So it's probably fine, but anyway, I just haven't had a chance to look at it. So
Yeah, so this is a completely separate standard at 15.2. It's not available online for free currently yet because it's not referenced in any model code. So I think you have to purchase it right now.
oh, maybe that's
Yeah.
part of it. So it's not at ICC.
What was that?
I don't, maybe I don't have it. Let's see, I was gonna see if it was on the ICC website. The standard
Maybe it
there.
is. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll take a look. Yeah, maybe that's why I haven't had a chance to look at it. So
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, on the ASHRAE website, I don't think it is provided as a read-only standard yet because it's not yet referenced by any model code.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make a motion to table this until our next tag meeting.
Okay. All right, we got a second. Who's that on the second?
And I guess I never responded to the question, but anyway. So yeah, this one is on the agenda for tomorrow, but I don't think it matters that if we have passed this today, if we can just provide the update. So
Right. I think that was Brad with the second. Is that right?
That is correct.
Thanks. Okay. So motion second to table, and then like Eric said, the discussion tomorrow will be we're introducing a petition for emergency rulemaking for some of these changes to support A2L refrigerants. So there will be more discussion at the full council meeting tomorrow on that. But motion for this item is for it to be tabled to the next tag meeting for additional discussion. So any other comments for this item? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So we'll be talking about this more. And then we didn't make it through all the items on the agenda as well, and we're right at time now. So those will also be part of the next tag meeting that staff is working on scheduling. So please reach out with your availability as they send out proposed times for that. And Krista, Annette, I don't know if we already had potential times
I was
posted yet.
suggesting that we go for this same time next week, if that works.
Okay. So yeah, please send out the email and I'll let the tag members respond. But thank you. And yeah, I think that brings us to the close. I guess I'll kind of put it out there if there's any other folks on the tag that want to be part of the correlation meeting next week. Maybe I'd suggest that staff put out the email request to tag members that might be interested with the, and that once hopefully we'll know the time as well for that
Yeah,
meeting.
Dustin should be done with his tag meeting now, so I can ask him
Okay.
what the time was that they had intended.
The correlation tag meeting is scheduled for the 19th, 1 to 4. And if you want, I can just send that meeting invite to all of you, all the tag members. And then if you want to attend, you can.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I mean, yeah, I think the meetings will invite info will be on the website as well. So
yeah.
All right, perfect. All right. Thank you everyone for making it through another lengthy meeting. And we'll look forward to additional discussion at the next tag meeting to hopefully close out the code change proposals. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.